On that rainy night in New York City, the fogged-up window of the taxi reflected a face the world thought was indestructible, but Dwayne Johnson got in silently, his tie crooked, holding a crumpled script with a phrase stuck in his throat. "Maybe I need to quit." The sound of sirens mixed with the rain as he leaned his forehead against the glass, mentally repeating the scene the director had shut down in 5 minutes. A dry no, another "you don't fit," and the city seemed to rush by faster than his faith. How long can a man who has always lifted heavy weights hold on to a silence like that without breaking? The car crossed the corner of Broadway with the feeling of a last chance, and the story shifted in the only place where no one takes pictures, the back seat. Between short breaths, he talked about his father, the $7, the fights that earned applause, and the doors that demanded he shrink just to fit through. The script opened again in his large hands, but now without anger. During that anonymous ride, a question pushed everything forward. What if the problem isn't his size, but the size of the door? When the destination arrived, nothing was signed, just the decision that was missing. That night in New York, the fine rain was hitting the asphalt when the back door of my taxi swung open with force. A massive man got in, broad shoulders, hands the size of tennis rackets, but his whole body seemed to carry an invisible weight that bowed his posture. It was Dwayne Johnson. I recognized him immediately, of course. Who wouldn't? But the guy who got into my car that night wasn't the Rock from The Ring, with the wide smile and the raised eyebrow. He was an exhausted man, with red eyes, a crooked tie, and an old leather satchel tucked under his arm. He threw himself onto the seat, sighed deeply, and just sat there, staring at nothing while the city passed by the foggy window. Usually, when a celebrity gets in my cab, there is that vibe of pretend you didn't recognize them, just leave the guy alone. This time was different. He wasn't trying to hide. No sunglasses, no baseball cap, no hood. He was there, raw, vulnerable, as if he didn't care anymore whether anyone recognized him or not. He loosened his tie slowly, like someone giving up on keeping up appearances, and rested his head on the cold glass. The sound of the rain outside created the perfect soundtrack for that heavy silence. I started the engine, adjusted the rearview mirror, and asked where he wanted to go. He murmured an address in Brooklyn, his voice hoarse, almost disappearing amidst the traffic noise. As I maneuvered through the wet streets of Manhattan, I noticed he was holding a crumpled script in his right hand. The pages were folded, stained, as if they had been read and reread 1,000 times. He was gripping that paper so hard his knuckles turned white. Every now and then he would look at the script and shake his head, like someone having a silent argument with themselves and losing. There was no smile, no pose, not the slightest attempt to look confident. Here was a man at his limit. And I had seen this before. That look of someone one step away from throwing it all away and quitting. The silence inside the car was so heavy that even the sound of honking horns outside seemed muffled. Dwayne would take a deep breath occasionally, as if trying to calm down, but his breathing came out irregular, tense. He crossed his arms, then uncrossed them, messed with his phone but didn't unlock the screen, and put it back in his pocket. Pure restlessness. I had driven for hundreds of people in tough moments, people coming back from job interviews that went wrong, people leaving a doctor's appointment with bad news, people breaking up relationships in the middle of the street. But there was something different that night. Maybe because the guy was famous, and even so, he was there, just as broken as anyone else. We passed a red light, and in that brief moment of pause, he finally spoke. "Another blown audition," he said, almost in a whisper. More to himself than to me. His voice came out tired, without energy, without that intensity everyone knew from The Ring. He dropped the script on the seat next to him and rubbed his face with both hands, like someone trying to wipe away frustration. "I don't know if I can take this anymore," he continued, looking at his own massive hands as if they were strangers, as if they were no longer useful for anything. And it was in that exact moment I realized this ride wasn't just going to be another ordinary trip through New York traffic. It would be the start of something neither of us expected. The taxi moved slowly down the congested avenue, and Dwayne kept looking at his hands. They were big hands, marked, with small scars on the knuckles, hands of someone who has hit a lot, lifted too much weight, held ring ropes until the skin cracked, but in that moment, they seemed useless. He turned his palms up, then down, as if trying to understand what had gone wrong. "I have been through this before," he said suddenly, breaking the silence. "I have been with nothing, literally nothing." His voice had the tone of someone revisiting old ghosts, the ones we think we buried but that always come back in moments of weakness. He told me, without me even asking, about the hard times after his football career failed to take off. "I was 23 years old and had $7 in my pocket," he said, letting out a short, bitter laugh. $7. Barely enough to buy a decent sandwich in New York. Dwayne explained how he went back to his parents' house defeated. No contract, no money, no prospects. Everyone expected me to be a football star, follow in my dad's footsteps in wrestling, do something big. And there I was, unemployed, living on the living room couch, hearing my mom crying at night because she couldn't pay the bills. The pain of that memory was still alive in his voice, even so many years later. As the taxi turned left, passing illuminated windows of designer stores he could probably buy entirely now, Dwayne continued, "I rebuilt everything from scratch in wrestling. I trained until my muscles tore. I learned to talk, to perform, to create a character. And it worked. The Rock became a name, became money, became recognition." He paused, biting his lower lip. "But now, trying to become a real actor, it feels like I am back to the $7, except this time with a lot more to lose." The irony was brutal. He had success, fame, money, but he felt just as lost as that broken kid in his 20s. He looked out the window and saw a young guy running in the rain trying to catch a bus. "Is it like this forever?" Dwayne asked, more to himself. "You win in one area, then you go to another and go back to being the guy nobody takes seriously? Like an infinite cycle of proving you are good enough?" He shook his head. "I thought after the success in wrestling, the doors would open, but that is not how it works. Every new door is a new battle, and I am tired of banging on doors that do not open." The tone of resignation in that sentence was heavy. It wasn't anger, it was pure exhaustion. The traffic light turned red again, and the city stopped around us for a few seconds. Dwayne took a deep breath and said something that stuck with me. "You know what's worse? It isn't even the rejection. It's the fear that deep down, they might be right. That I really am just a big guy who knows how to hit people and nothing more." He crossed his arms, protecting himself from something invisible. "What if I am forcing a door that isn't for me? What if Hollywood never accepts me as a real actor?" That question hung in the air as the light turned green, and the taxi started moving again. But something told me that to answer that doubt, we would need to go back even further in time to understand where all that pain came from. As the taxi cut across the Brooklyn Bridge, Dwayne closed his eyes for a moment and went back in time. "Let me tell you how I got here," he said, adjusting his posture in the seat. "Because this story doesn't start today. It starts way back, when I was just a big kid with a stupid dream of playing professional football." His voice took on a tone that was half nostalgic, half bitter. He described the brutal practices at the University of Miami, the sky-high expectations, the NFL scouts coming to watch the games. "I gave everything. I woke up at 5 in the morning, trained until I threw up, studied the plays until I memorized every move. I thought I was guaranteed, but life had other plans. When the time came for the draft, my name wasn't called," he said, his voice cracking a little. "I went to Canada to play in the minor league, the CFL. I was making peanuts. I shared an apartment with 3 guys, ate instant noodles every day because that was what I could afford." Dwayne opened his eyes and looked at the rain hitting the glass. "And in the middle of the season, they cut me. They simply said I wasn't good enough. 23 years old, no job, no money, no plan B." He ran a hand through his wet hair. "I remember calling my dad crying. I had never failed like that before. And it hurt more because I knew he had been through it too." His story mixed with his whole family's history. My dad was a pro wrestler, my grandfather too. They knew the taste of rising and falling, of winning and losing everything. But I didn't want to follow that path. I wanted to be different, to be the football guy, the first Johnson to get out of the ring. He let out a humorless laugh. "Funny how we run from destiny, right?" I went back to my parents' house with $7 in my pocket and my dad looked at me and said, "Son, you know how to fight. Come train with me." And I didn't have a choice. It was that, or become a burger flipper. The wounded pride of that moment still echoed in his voice. Dwayne described the first months in wrestling as the hardest of his life. It wasn't just learning to fall, to hit, to fake pain. It was creating a character, learning to talk on the mic, to provoke the crowd, to make 20,000 people hate you or love you in 3 minutes. He shook his head, and I was terrible at the beginning. I froze in front of the camera, forgot my lines, messed up the moves. The older guys laughed at me backstage. They said I was just another wrestler's kid trying to ride his dad's fame. But he didn't give up. He trained, adjusted, reinvented, until I created The Rock. And then, everything changed. I became the guy. The most loved, the most hated. The one who sold tickets. The one who made noise. The taxi stopped at a light, and Dwayne stayed quiet for a few seconds, processing. I hit rock bottom twice. Once in football, another time before becoming The Rock. And both times I rose. I rebuilt. I won. He turned to me, eyes fixed. "So why does this rejection in Hollywood hurt so much? Why do I feel like this time I won't make it?" The question hung in the air as the light turned green, and I realized the answer to that lay in what he was going to tell me next, in the audition rooms, in the looks of disdain, in the doors closing in the face of one of the most recognized men on the planet. Back in the present, with the rain beating down hard now, Dwayne leaned forward and rested his elbows on his knees. "You know what they told me today at the audition?" he asked, his voice loaded with frustration. "That I am physically too imposing for the role. Too imposing. Like that is a defect." He let out a dry laugh. "I spent my whole life building this body, lifting weights, training, molding myself, and now that has become the reason for them to reject me." Dwayne shook his head in disbelief. "They want an actor, not a wrestler. They want someone who looks normal, who blends in. And I will never blend in." He opened the leather satchel and pulled out some crumpled sheets, notes from other auditions. "Look at this," he said, showing a page full of comments. "Audition for a police drama. Too muscular. Doesn't look like a real cop. Audition for a romance. Too intimidating. No chemistry with the lead actress. Audition for a comedy. Too caricaturish. Looks like a wrestler pretending to be funny." He threw the papers back into the bag with force. "Everything I am, everything I built, became a problem. They can't see me beyond The Rock, and maybe they never will." The frustration was stamped on every word, every gesture. The taxi passed a movie theater, and Dwayne looked at the bright marquee announcing the films showing. None with his name. "I have done some movies already, but always the same roles. The strong guy, the bodyguard, the soldier, the henchman. Always the muscle, never the mind. Always the action, never the emotion." He rubbed his face with his hands. "Today I went to test for a dramatic role. A family man fighting a disease. Serious, deep stuff. And the director barely let me finish the scene. Said he wasn't buying the vulnerability, that I seemed forced." Dwayne mimicked the director's condescending tone. "Maybe you should focus on action roles, where you shine naturally." The rain got heavier, and the noise on the taxi roof increased. "You know what the worst part is?" he continued. "I spent months preparing for this audition. I read the script about 50 times. I watched dramatic films. I took acting classes with a private coach. I practiced that scene until I memorized every pause, every breath." Dwayne clenched his fists. "And in 5 minutes, the guy discarded me. 5 minutes to decide that everything I am doesn't fit in his world." The anger was there, but mixed with something deeper. The feeling of not belonging, of trying to get into a club that was never going to accept people like him. He turned to me and said, "I am not asking to be the next Robert De Niro. I just want a chance to show that there is more to me than muscles and a raised eyebrow." His voice was tired now. No fight left. But maybe they are right. Maybe I am trying to be something I am not. Maybe Hollywood isn't for me. The taxi turned onto a dark corner, and the light from the street lamps created shadows on his face. And it was in that moment I realized he wasn't just venting about a bad audition. He was questioning if all the sacrifice was worth it, if it was time to accept the limits or keep banging on locked doors. As we crossed Brooklyn, the city lights flashed through the wet window, creating an almost hypnotic effect. Dwayne kept staring at those flashes of light and started talking about behind the scenes in Hollywood, that side nobody sees. There was this one time I walked into a meeting room and the producer greeted me with, "Hey champ, here to practice some moves?" he recounted, imitating the mocking tone. I was in a suit, had studied the script all night, was ready to talk about the character, and the guy treated me like a circus attraction. Dwayne shook his head. I laughed at the time, pretended it was a joke, but inside it hurt. It always hurts. He described other similar situations, film sets where real actors looked down on him like he was an intruder, hallway conversations where he heard whispers, "Wrestlers can't act, they only know how to scream and hit," directors who asked him not to think too much about the lines, just be natural, as if natural for him meant being dumb and strong. There was a director who literally told me, "Dwayne, you don't need to understand the character's motivation. Just get in the scene, break some things, and get out. That is what the audience expects from you." The humiliation of that moment was still alive in his voice. And you know the worst part? I did it, because I needed the work, the money, the credibility. The rain let up a bit, and the sound of the windshield wipers became more evident. "The problem isn't even the rejection," Dwayne continued. "It's the disrespect disguised as a compliment. Like, you are amazing at what you do, but maybe you should keep doing just that. Like I was a product with a short expiration date." He looked at his own hands again. Those massive hands that had held trophies, lifted absurd weights, landed rehearsed punches in packed rings. They want The Rock. They don't want Dwayne. And I am tired of performing all the time, of pretending I don't care, of being the invincible guy who never doubts, never falls, never cries. He told me about a recent awards party where he was surrounded by Hollywood stars. I was there in a tuxedo trying to talk about cinema, about art. And a famous actor came up to me and said, "Man, you are huge. I bet you can lift this table by yourself, huh?" And everyone around laughed. Dwayne closed his eyes for a second, breathing deeply. I laughed along. I lifted the table. I made the joke. Because that is what they expect from me. But inside I wanted to scream, "I have read Dostoevsky. I can discuss narrative arcs. I have so much more to offer than brute force." His voice shook a little. But nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants the vulnerable, intelligent, sensitive Dwayne. They want the trained monster. The taxi passed a park where a few people were running despite the rain. Dwayne watched those solitary runners and said something that struck me. "You know what's heavy? Carrying an image that doesn't match who you really are. Everyone thinks I am indestructible, that I wake up happy, motivated, confident. That rejection doesn't affect me." He turned to me. "But the truth is I wake up tired, doubting myself, asking myself if it is worth it to keep banging on doors that will never open." The raw honesty of those words cut through the silence of the car, and I knew that soon this conversation was going to reach a turning point, because every story of a fall has a moment where the person decides, go down further or start climbing. We stopped at another red light, and the silence inside the taxi became almost suffocating. Dwayne was holding that crumpled script so tight it looked like it was going to tear. I don't usually meddle in passengers' lives, but this time, something nudged me. "That script there," I said, breaking the silence. "What was it about?" He raised his eyes, surprised, as if he had forgotten there was another person in the car. He hesitated for a second, then looked at the crumpled pages. "About a father," he answered, his voice low. "A father who is dying and tries to fix the relationship with his son before it is too late." He ran his finger over the printed words. "It's heavy. It's real. It's exactly the type of role I always wanted to do." Dwayne started talking faster now, as if the floodgates had opened. "It isn't a hero role. There are no explosions, no fight scenes. It is just a common man dealing with regrets, with time past, with unspoken words." He looked at me in the rearview mirror. "This character doesn't need muscles. He needs truth, and I have that truth. I grew up watching my dad fighting to be present, to balance his career with his family. I know what it is like to feel you disappointed someone you love." His connection with that role was visceral, genuine. When I read this script for the first time, I cried. I cried because I saw my dad there. I saw me there. I saw the chance to show I can do more than punch people on a green screen. He explained how he prepared for that audition with obsessive dedication. I spent 3 months studying, not just memorizing lines, but understanding every comma, every pause, every breath of the character. Dwayne said he watched dozens of dramatic movies, studied actors like Philip Seymour Hoffman, Daniel Day-Lewis, people who disappear inside the role. I wanted to prove I can do it, that I am not just The Rock saying funny lines and lifting cars. He paused. I arrived at the audition prepared, vulnerable, open, and in 5 minutes they sent me away saying I didn't fit the profile. The frustration returned to his voice, mixed with a deep sadness. The light turned green, but I drove slowly, wanting to hear more. That was my last chance with this director, Dwayne continued. He is one of the biggest names in independent cinema, wins awards, discovers talent. If he had given me a chance, doors would start to open. Other directors would look at me differently. He rested his head against the glass. But now I am just another rejected wrestler trying to be something he isn't. The defeat was stamped on every word. And the worst part is, I don't know how many more times I can take hearing no. How many times I can get up and try again. I am not that 23-year-old kid full of energy anymore. I am tired. I asked another question, more direct this time. And what are you going to do now? Give up? Dwayne stayed silent for a long moment. The rain started falling hard again, drumming on the taxi roof. He looked at the script, then at the city outside, then at his own hand. I don't know, he answered with brutal honesty. Part of me wants to throw this script in the trash, accept that Hollywood will never take me seriously, and go back to what I know how to do. Action movies, shallow characters, easy money. He paused. But there is another part, small, stubborn, that still believes I can be more. And it was in that sentence I realized that taxi ride was turning into something bigger, a moment of decision where he was going to choose who he would be from there on out. As the taxi continued through the wet streets, Dwayne started connecting the dots between that moment and other near endings in his life. This isn't the first time I have thought about quitting, he admitted. There was that tiny apartment in Miami, right after my football career sank. 1 bedroom, smelled like mold, peeling paint. He described the scene with painful detail, overdue electric bills piled on the coffee table, phone ringing non-stop with debt collectors on the other end, empty fridge. I used to lie on that old bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, wondering if it was worth continuing. If it wasn't better to give up for good and take any job, far from the spotlight, far from the dreams. He told me about the calls he made to managers, producers, anyone who could open a door. I called, left messages, sent resumes, and nothing. Silence. Dwayne imitated the robotic tone of answering machines. Your message has been received. We will return your call as soon as possible. He let out a bitter laugh. Spoiler, they never returned the call. The silent rejection was worse than the direct no because it left room for hope, that cruel hope that keeps you waiting for something that never comes. There was 1 week I went 3 days straight without leaving the apartment, without showering, without eating properly, just lying there thinking maybe my story ended there. Another moment of almost total resignation came in the early years of wrestling. I was on the road, traveling from city to city, wrestling in small gyms for $300 a night, sleeping in fleabag motels, eating cheap fast food, hurting my body every week. Dwayne described a specific night somewhere in the American Midwest. I had just finished wrestling. I was bleeding from a cut on my forehead, sore, exhausted. I sat in the empty locker room and looked in the mirror. He paused, reliving that moment. And I thought, is this it? Is this what I trained so hard for? To be a nameless clown in a third-rate ring? The despair of that night almost made him drop everything and go home. Broken promises also marked his trajectory. There was a manager who swore he was going to get me a big contract with the WWE. Trust me, Dwayne, you are going to be a star. I believed him. I trained more, performed better, gave my all. Dwayne shook his head, and when the time came to negotiate, the guy vanished. Blocked my numbers, stopped answering emails, took an advance commission I had paid and disappeared. Betrayal hurt more than rejection, because when you are rejected, at least the truth is clear. But when they trick you, when they make you believe in something false, you lose trust in everyone. even yourself. The taxi turned onto a darker street, and Dwayne kept looking through the foggy windows. "You know what all these moments have in common?" he asked. "In all of them, I was alone, in an empty room, on an unknown road, with a phone that only rang with debt collectors." He turned to me. "And loneliness makes you think crazy things, makes you doubt everything, makes you want to quit because in the end, who is going to care if you stop?" The vulnerability of those words was raw, but for some reason, every time I got close to quitting, something pulled me back. I don't know if it was pride, stubbornness, or fear of becoming a statistic. And while he spoke, I realized we were reaching a crucial point in the conversation, that moment when the penny drops and the person finally understands the pattern they were repeating. The conversation was getting deeper, and Dwayne started connecting the dots in a way I had never seen someone do in real time. He stayed quiet for a few seconds, looking at the rain hitting the glass, and suddenly said, "Wait, I just realized something." He turned to me with wide eyes. "Every time I was rejected, I was trying to be someone else. I was trying to fit into what they wanted, not what I really am." He picked up the crumpled script and flipped through the pages quickly. Today, in this audition, I walked into the room trying to look like a serious actor, speaking softly, gesturing little, erasing everything that makes me, me. The revelation was happening right there, live. He continued, almost talking to himself now. "In football, I tried to be the straight-laced player, disciplined, following all the rules, but my essence was always more rebellious, more intense, more explosive." Dwayne slapped his knee, "And when I got into wrestling, it took years to succeed because I was trying to be a generic version of a wrestler. It was only when I created The Rock, with all the arrogance, the exaggerated charisma, the catchphrases, that things took off." He looked at me like he was having an epiphany, because I finally stopped trying to be palatable and started being me, amplified. And people loved exactly that. It was finally clicking, and I could see the shift happening in real time. "But in Hollywood, I went back to the same mistake," he said, his voice mixed with frustration and relief. I started straightening my hair, speaking slower, hiding my tattoos, pretending I wasn't the guy screaming in the ring. Dwayne imitated his own polished version of himself. Smooth voice, contained posture, rehearsed smile. I thought if I became more normal, more like the other actors, they would accept me. But guess what? The more I tried to disappear, the more invisible I became. He shook his head, amazed at his own blindness. "They don't want a watered-down version of me. And if they don't want the real version, then the problem isn't mine." I made a simple observation, but it seemed to resonate. "So maybe the mistake isn't you being too big, too marked, too intense. Maybe the mistake is you banging on the wrong doors." Dwayne went quiet, processing. "Have you ever thought about creating your own space, instead of asking for permission to enter their club, building your own?" He looked at me as if that idea had never crossed his mind. Like, make my own movies? Choose roles that speak to who I am, not who they think I should be? His voice had a hint of hope now, something that wasn't there before. He picked up the script again, but this time with a different look. "What if I stopped trying to convince directors that I can play a common father and started looking for stories about extraordinary fathers? Big guys, intense, imperfect, but real?" Dwayne was thinking out loud now, because I am that. I am not the discreet guy who goes unnoticed. I am the guy who fills the room, who speaks loud, who has presence. And maybe that isn't a defect. Maybe that is my greatest asset. He took a deep breath, and for the first time that night, I saw a genuine smile on his face. And I knew that from there on, the conversation was going to take a different turn, because he had just discovered something that would change everything. The conversation had taken an interesting turn, and I decided to go a little deeper. "Dwayne, do you know how many people are quitting right this second?" I asked, pointing to the city outside. "Over there on that subway train passing by, there is someone going home after losing their job. On that bus, there is a single mom who just got rejected for a home loan. And here, in this taxi, there is you." I paused to let the idea sink in. The difference between you guys isn't the pain. It isn't the frustration. It isn't the urge to give up. That is the same for everyone. The difference is in what you are going to do with it in the next 24 hours. He stayed quiet, listening. I continued. New York is a city of millions of almosts. Almost became a musician. Almost opened my business. Almost became someone. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw he was paying full attention. And do you know what separates those who stay in the almost from those who become reality? A moment. A single moment of decision where the person chooses. Do I go down further, or do I climb up from here? Dwayne nodded slowly. Most people go down because going down is easy. It is comfortable. It is safe. You go back to what you know, accept the limits, stop dreaming big, and live the rest of your life asking what if. The truth of those words echoed inside the car. I told him about a passenger I had years ago. He was a writer, had written an amazing book but was rejected by 23 publishers, 23 direct no's. Dwayne raised his eyebrows, interested. He got in my taxi crying, saying he was going to quit, burn the manuscript and get a normal job. And I asked, "Do you believe in your book?" He said yes. So I said, "Send it to the 24th publisher. And if they say no, send it to the 25th, because you only need one yes to change everything." I paused. 3 years later, I saw his book in a Barnes & Noble window. It had become a bestseller, and all because he decided to try one more time. I turned my gaze back to Dwayne. You are in that moment now. This audition that didn't work out can be the end, or it can be the beginning of something bigger. Depends on what you decide to do tomorrow morning when you wake up. He fiddled with the crumpled script, thoughtful. If you wake up and throw this dream in the trash, accept that Hollywood will never want you. Go back to easy roles. Nobody will judge you. It is a valid choice. But what if you wake up and decide, screw what they think. I am going to create my own path, my way, on my terms. The energy inside the taxi was changing, because at the end of the day, their no only has power if you give the power to them. I made one last observation before we reached the destination. Dwayne, you have already turned the game around twice. You climbed out of rock bottom in football and became a champion in wrestling, came out of anonymity and became The Rock. You know how to turn the game around better than anyone. I looked him in the eyes through the mirror. So why would this time be different? Why would Hollywood be the limit you can't cross? He stayed silent, but I saw in his eyes that something was shifting. Defeat was giving way to a silent determination. And as the taxi approached the final destination, I knew that conversation had planted a seed, and that soon he was going to take the decision that would change everything. We were a few blocks from the address he had given, and the atmosphere inside the taxi had changed completely. Dwayne kept looking out the window, observing the city that never stops, and started speaking in a different tone, no longer one of defeat, but of reflection. You know something funny? He said. All my biggest victories came right after my worst moments. He turned a bit in the seat. When I was at rock bottom after football, thinking my life was over at 23, that was when the opportunity in wrestling appeared. I didn't plan it. It wasn't what I wanted, but it was what saved my life. His voice had gained a new strength. He continued recalling the turning points. And when I was just another generic wrestler lost in the middle of dozens of other guys, that was when I went head-to-head, created The Rock, and risked everything on a persona that could have gone very wrong. Dwayne smiled, remembering. My manager at the time said I was crazy, that I was going to burn myself out, that nobody was going to take seriously a guy who kept raising his eyebrow and talking about himself in the third person. He laughed, and it was exactly that which made me explode, because I stopped trying to be accepted and started being impossible to ignore. The lesson was clear. The boldest bets had given the biggest returns. Dwayne looked at the script on the seat next to him and then at me. What if this no today is just another one of those moments? What if it is the push I needed to stop asking for permission and start taking what is mine? He picked up the paper again, but this time without crumpling it, without anger. Instead of waiting for a director to choose me, I can choose the director. I can produce my own movies. I can create roles that were made for me, not roles where I need to shrink to fit. The idea was taking shape in his mind, and I could see the change happening in real time. Because if The Rock worked, it was because I built it from scratch. Nobody gave me that. I created it. The ride was coming to an end, but the conversation was far from over. "You know what I just realized?" Dwayne said, staring straight ahead. "I was treating Hollywood like it was the WWE ring 20 years ago, a place where I needed to prove myself, earn approval, wait my turn." He shook his head. "But I am not that guy anymore. I have a name, I have an audience, I have resources. I don't need to knock on any door. I can kick the wall down and build my own entrance." The metaphor was perfect, and he knew it. This audition that didn't work out wasn't a defeat. It was a reminder that I was playing the wrong game. And now I am going to change the rules. The taxi stopped in front of his building, but neither of us moved. Dwayne sat there, breathing deep, processing everything that had been said. "I got into this taxi wanting to quit," he said, looking at me with gratitude in his eyes. "And I am going to walk out of here knowing exactly what to do." He opened the door slowly, but before getting out, turned one more time. "Thank you. Seriously. You have no idea how much this conversation changed everything." And as he stepped out of the car holding that crumpled script with a new strength, I knew I was witnessing a historic moment, the exact instant when Dwayne Johnson decided to stop asking for space and start occupying it. Before leaving the taxi completely, Dwayne did something symbolic. He took the crumpled script he had thrown on the seat in anger and started smoothing it out slowly, carefully, like someone fixing something precious that was almost destroyed. He smoothed each page with the palm of his hand, removing the creases, trying to return dignity to that paper that represented so much. "This script here isn't trash," he said, more to himself than to me. The problem was never the script. The problem was me thinking I needed someone's approval to make it matter. He put the pages in his leather satchel with a new respect, as if he were storing a treasure map. He took a deep breath, that kind of breath you take when you are about to make a big decision. "I decided one thing right now," Dwayne said, looking directly into my eyes through the rearview mirror. "I am never going to walk into an audition room apologizing for being who I am ever again." His voice was firm, without hesitation. "I am not going to straighten my hair, hide my tattoos, speak softer, shrink my body to fit into a mold that wasn't made for me anymore." He tapped his chest lightly. "If they want an actor who is 5'7", let them hire an actor who is 5'7". But if they want Dwayne Johnson, they are going to have to accept all of me with everything that comes with it." His determination was palpable. "I am going to create my own production company," he continued. And this time, it wasn't a maybe anymore. It was a decision. I am going to develop projects that were made for guys like me, stories about big men with even bigger hearts, characters who don't need to be small to be deep. Dwayne was planning out loud now. "And if no famous director wants to work with me on my terms, I will find new, hungry directors who are down to take a risk. Because there is always someone willing to break the rules with you, you just need to look in the right places." He looked at the city outside, illuminated and indifferent, and said something that gave me chill. "This rejection today, I am going to use it as fuel. Every no I get from here on out is going to become another brick in the construction of my empire." The anger had transformed into purpose. I am going to prove I was right the whole time. That I can be a serious actor, a respected producer, a potent storyteller, but my way, not their way. He smiled, and it was a different smile than I had seen before. Confident, dangerous, full of promise. And when I am up there, when my movies are breaking box office records and winning awards, I am going to remember this night, this rain, this taxi, and I am going to be thankful for every door that closed in my face. Dwayne finally opened the door and put one foot out, but before leaving completely, turned one last time. "You said the difference between who quits and who continues is a single moment of decision." He pointed to his own chest. "This was my moment, and I chose to continue, but not the way they want. My way." He got out of the taxi, closed the door slowly, and stood on the sidewalk for a few seconds, letting the rain wet his face. And when he walked into the building, he wasn't the defeated man who had entered my car hours ago anymore. He was someone who had just decided to rewrite his own destiny, one scene at a time. Some years after that rainy night in New York, I was at home watching television when I saw Dwayne Johnson on a talk show interview. He was promoting another hit movie, this time not just as an actor but as a producer. The host asked about his journey in Hollywood, and Dwayne let out that characteristic smile. "Man, there was one night I almost gave up on everything," he told, and my heart skipped a beat. I had just been rejected at another audition, got into a taxi in New York completely destroyed, and the driver, who I don't even know the name of to this day, asked me the right questions at the right time. The audience laughed, but I knew he was serious. That conversation changed my life. His career had exploded in a way few managed. Dwayne had created his own production company, exactly as he said he would that night. Developed projects where he didn't need to fit into small molds. He was the mold. Action movies with emotional depth. Comedies where his physique was part of the joke, but not the whole joke. Even some dramas where he finally managed to show the vulnerability he fought so hard to express. And the public had embraced it all. Because when you stop apologizing for who you are and start celebrating it, people feel the authenticity, and they connect. I saw behind-the-scenes clips where Dwayne interacted with the film crew. He remembered everyone's name, greeted everyone from the director to the production assistant with the same respect. In interviews, he always spoke about failure as an essential part of success. "I failed more times than most people tried," he would say with that natural charisma. But every failure taught me something. Every no redirected me to a better yes. And when they asked about the decisive moment of his career, he always went back to that night. It was when I stopped trying to be accepted and started accepting myself. Years after that ride, I was driving through the same streets of New York when I received a call from an unknown number. It was someone from Dwayne's team. He had tracked me down, don't ask me how, and wanted to invite me to the premiere of one of his movies. I went, and when I arrived on the red carpet, completely out of place amidst celebrities and photographers, Dwayne saw me and came running. "This is the guy I talked about," he shouted to everyone around. "The taxi driver who saved my career that night." He hugged me as if we were old friends, and maybe we were. "Thank you for not letting me quit," he whispered in my ear. You have no idea how much that conversation meant. Watching the movie that night, with Dwayne shining on the big screen exactly as he was, big, intense, authentic, I realized something powerful. That taxi ride hadn't been about me saving his career, it had been about him saving himself. I just asked the right questions. He was the one who had the courage to answer honestly and act on it. And as the final credits rolled up the screen and the audience gave a standing ovation, I thought about how many other people were, at that exact moment, inside a taxi, a bus, a train, thinking about giving up, and how a single moment of decision, a single honest conversation, a single no transformed into fuel could change everything. Because at the end of the day, the difference between who quits and who becomes a legend isn't in talent, it isn't in luck. It is in the choice you make the day after everything seems to have fallen apart. How many times have you stepped out of the ring thinking it was over, when actually it was the most honest beginning of your story? If today the no hit hard, transform that energy into concrete action. Reopen the script you crumpled, list a door that doesn't depend on permission, and mark a possible step for tomorrow. Who do you need to contact now? A creative partner, an independent director, a support group, to build the entrance instead of asking for a pass. Now it is your turn to decide. Are you going to file the dream away until it gets cold, or are you going to heat up the game with a simple and irreversible decision in the next 24 hours? Write in the comments which door you are going to build first. This could be the push for someone who is about to give up. And if this video gave you clarity and courage, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, like and share to keep receiving stories and strategies that flip the switch when life gets tight.